I'll read those.
I thought you were giving that to use as a table.
Oh, there's my piece.
That's a good one. Alrighty.
Call this meeting to order. The meeting of the Metropolitan Water District representatives, caucus, and a special meeting of the board of directors. Do we please call the roll?
Director Tommy Favai, Director Desi Alvarez, Director Scott Houston, Director Gloria Gray,
Here.
and President John Deere.
Here.
President Deere, we do not have a quorum of the board of directors. However, we do only have 2 discussion items that we could go through at the discretion of the president.
Oh, do we have directors that are running late? No, they had not.
I don't believe they'll be able to attend.
Okay, well, we'll go on then. Item number 4, discussion items.
Yes, President Deere. Item 4A is a discussion of the water supply conditions update. And for this presentation, we do have Nusha Razavian, Resource Specialist in Metropolitan Water District.
I apologize. I skipped over public comment. And this meeting is being held both in person and virtually. If there is any member of the public that would like to speak, please indicate so by raising your virtual hand. And Mr. President, I do not see a request for public comment. So we should move forward with item 4A.
Okay, item 4A. Water supply conditions update.
Right, thank you. My name is Nusha Razavian. Again, I'm a resource specialist at Metropolitan Water District. So we'll all be providing an update on our latest water supply conditions for Metropolitan. So if we can go to the next slide. So the big exciting update for us is that we did receive an update from the Department of Water Resources last week on the State Water Project allocation, and it has increased from a 10% to a 30% allocation. And this is mainly due to the improved hydrologic conditions that we saw at the end of December as well as early January that really helped add to our storage levels within the State Water Project system. Now, in terms of any additional updates to the allocation that is unclear at this time, it's been a pretty dry January, which I'll go through in the coming slides. But if we do see conditions continuing to improve throughout the hydrologic year, then we would see additional increases to that allocation. And for Metropolitan, a 30% allocation is about 570,000 acre feet of State Water Project supplies. So if we go to the next slide, and then just the next slide, we'll just go through some of these highlights. So this slide provides just a general summary of the conditions on both of our systems, from the State Water Project on the left-hand side to the Upper Colorado River Basin on the right-hand side. But I'll be going through some more specifics on these details in the coming slides. So if we can go to the next slide. You'll see in this slide, this is the precipitation within the Northern Sierra. So you can see that we got some really great gains with that precipitation in the month of December, specifically at the end of December, going into January. But since then, it's kind of flat lines, as you can see from that orange line, because we didn't really see a lot of storms come through in the month of January, unfortunately. But at this time, it's still remaining above average. And we do actually have a storm system coming through next week. So hopefully that'll help improve what you're seeing on this slide. Now on the next slide, you'll see the snowpack conditions. So that's been a bit less favorable for us than we've seen in past years. And that's because despite seeing a good amount of storms come through in December, they were pretty warm. So unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of snowpack that was able to build up during that time. And so it's less than half of normal right now. And then if we go to the next slide, the silver lining is that from those storms, we saw a good amount of increases to our storage levels, specifically at Lake Oroville. And so since the end of the year into this current year, you can see that it's been continuing to climb, and it's around 2.8 million acre feet at this time. And so the increases that we saw within Oroville from those storms is one of the main reasons why we were able to get that allocation increase. And then if we go to the next slide, You'll see the State Water Project share of San Luis. So for Metropolitan, it's very important for us to see how conditions are faring in San Luis because we store a lot of our carryover supplies in that reservoir. And you can see at this time, it's about less than 100,000 acre feet from full. So this is a reservoir that we're actively looking at each day to make sure that we don't reach full and potentially spill any of our carryover supplies if that capacity is reached. Now, the Department of Water Resources is continuing to work with the Bureau of Reclamation on a MOU to allow us to use some of the Central Valley Project share of that reservoir in case our share does become full. But at this time, it's been holding pretty steady over the last few weeks. Now, if we go to the next slide, you'll see the Upper Colorado River Basin snowpack. So kind of a similar story to the conditions we've been seeing in the Northern Sierra, that although we saw some storms come through in the Upper Colorado River Basin in December and early January, unfortunately, they were warm as well. So we haven't been able to see a lot of snowpack being able to build up there this year. And unfortunately, the snowpack is actually going along the minimum probable line that the Bureau tracks for the snowpack. And so what this will mean is that if those conditions continue to be pretty poor this year, we will see decreases in our storage levels within Lakes Powell and Meade, which will of course be probably a topic of discussion with the negotiations that are currently going on within the Colorado River Basin. And just a quick update on those negotiations. They have a deadline of February 14th for the states to reach an agreement. So there are a lot of meetings going on at the current to kind of reach an agreement amongst the states. Now, if you go to the next slide, this was the precipitation forecast as of last week when I sent in the slides, but since then, luckily we do actually see some storm systems coming through specifically within the Northern Sierra side on that left-hand circle in white. So hopefully we'll be able to add some more snowpack into the system during that time and more into our reservoirs. Now, if we go to the next few slides, we'll be highlighting our water supply and demand balance. And there are some updates to this slide since I sent them in last week. Now, the allocation, of course, is at that 30% for the State Water Project. But since last week, we did receive a higher priority water use adjustment update from the Bureau of Reclamation. It's around about negative 70,000 acre feet. So that blue box that you see at the bottom is a little bit lower at this time, which means that actually, although we're showing a little bit of surplus here, our demands are slightly above where our current supply estimates are. So we have a slight gap of around 30,000 acre feet. Not too bad for us to handle this year. We luckily have plenty of storage that we can pull from if needed. But of course, that higher priority water use adjustment changes each week. So we will continue to see that change throughout this year. But still a pretty good news for us. We're about balanced at this time with that 30% allocation. And if the allocation does increase, we will probably kick into a surplus mode. And with that, that's the end of my slides, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions? Go ahead.
I've obviously had a chance to see these presentations as things have evolved over the past couple of months. I assume that Met does track local precipitation.
Local precipitation,
Like
slightly.
in LA County and groundwater recharge, natural recharge and stuff like that.
Right.
Does that play a role in how you manage kind of your supplies in storage in Northern California and the Colorado River? I mean, are you closely tracking that and has Met over these past few years looked at coordinating with member agencies and local agencies to perhaps better utilize those supplies?
It's something that we definitely look at in terms of managing our demands. So of course, if LA receives a lot of water through the Los Angeles Aqueduct, we expect to see their demands on us go down in a given year. So that's something we actively look at each week on how the LA Aqueduct is doing, as well as our groundwater supplies, say in Upper San Gabriel. That's something that we want to look at in terms of their storage levels, because we do coordinate with them throughout the year in terms of the cyclic program that we have. So that's mainly what we're tracking in terms of those programs, and as well as meeting demands for membranes.
Thank you.
Other questions? Lori, any questions?
No, thank you. Can you hear me? Thank you.
Okay, where's, there's one here? Oh, go ahead.
Thank you, Director. President here. Nusha, thank you for the presentation. Going back to maybe slide 12. So is this kind of saying that if the state water project allocation stays at 30% for the rest of the year, hopefully it goes up, but if not, that there's still only a minimal impact to Metropolitan's current kind of reserves that are in water or reserves?
Right, so right now, this number is actually kind of flipped of what you see here. We have about 30,000 acre feet of a gap at the moment because of that update to the adjustment. So if it does go higher, we would be more in a surplus mode because every 5% increase we see from the statewide project allocation is about 100,000 acre feet for us.
And I guess, we came into this year with record storage, that you have right now. Say this does end up with a dry year and then we have a couple more dry years. I guess, how long, looking into the future, we have to look to kind of say, okay, we're getting back into more of a, I guess, a hairy situation with the water supply that we saw, 4 years ago.
Yeah, it's important to us to definitely plan for a 3 to 4 year drought scenario. So that's something that we work with our operations team to see if we have enough supplies and storage to manage through a 3 or 4 year drought sequence like we saw in 2020 to 2022. So that's it's kind of a dry hydrologic sequence that we like to model to see if we have to be able to withstand that. The tricky thing, though, that I'm sure you can imagine is that we don't know exactly how our Colorado River supplies are going to be come next year. So we are assuming a cut of around, say, 200,000 acre feet to those supplies when we're modeling that, but we don't know exactly how those cuts actually be. So at the moment, we can definitely withstand, I should say, 3 to 4 drought year sequence at this time, but keep in mind, we don't know exactly what to shape out with the negotiations.
Thank you.
Question, any other questions? Hearing none, thank you very much for the
Thank you.
presentation. Appreciate it. We have a second,
Yes, President Jeter, that brings us to item 4B. It's the Bay Delta update. And for the presentation, we do have Dr. Maureen Martin, the manager of Bay Delta Science and Regulatory Strategy for Metropolitan Water District. And I do believe she's online joining us.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the accommodation and being able to participate remotely. So thank you very much. Good afternoon, President Deere, members of the board. Here to provide a brief overview of some exciting updates to all things Bay Delta regulatory and the tunnel. So next slide. Next slide. Some of the key things we're going to go over here today are updates to the Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan. And as you'll recall, this is the plan that the state board sets that really governs salinity standards and outflow standards in the Delta. And to date, those objectives have been met exclusively by the Central Valley Project and state water projects. And those things can affect our water supply, our ability to manage our upstream reservoirs, as well as the exports in the Delta. So those are currently being updated and reevaluated at the state board. So next slide. Sorry. Also, what affects operations in the Delta include various permits. So the State Water Project, DWR, has an incidental take permit. It was recently updated and modified in December of 2025. DWR sought the suspension of a Fall X2 requirement, and that basically is a requirement that keeps salinity in the Western Delta a certain amount for a certain duration. And it was off-ramped last year for the first time. I would like to say that, and this is based on sound science. This is based on a life cycle model that indicated that Fall X2 didn't really provide a lot of benefit for Delta smelt, but had a really high water cost. So it was off-ramped last year by DWR. And this current amendment that was just issued off-ramped it for this year as well. This is a condition that is only required year by year, depending on the hydrology. So it's only like in wet and above normal years that this action would be triggered. And so DWR sought to off-ramp it for this year, and CDFW issued it, granted this off-ramp for this year. So this means we will not have to comply with the Fall X2, but it was just a temporary 1-year off-ramp. And in exchange for getting rid of this Fall X2, which had a high water cost, CDFW included a new mitigation requirement for the department to try to generate more food for Delta smelt in the Sassoon Marsh for a couple of years. So they also granted additional flexibility in export operations related to real-time conditions to determine if Delta smelt were at risk or not. And so this flexibility in export operations allowed the State Water Project to capture an additional 35,000 acre-feet during those early storm periods. So that should be viewed as a success. Next slide. The federal projects are governed by the federal permits as well. And so the Bureau recently updated their permit requirements as well. They issued a record of decision in December of 2025. And the projects are, jointly operated under the Coordinated Operations Agreement. So although they have separate permits, the operations in the Delta are coordinated across the projects. Reclamation sought similar updates to the state ITP amendments that we just reviewed, but they got a permanent off-ramp for Fall X2. So the federal projects at no point going forward will have any responsibility to implement Fall X2. It remains to be seen is a potential in future years that there could be residual responsibility for the State Water Project should all the conditions work out. So that's still a term in our permit for the State Water Project. But since we've had good success in the last couple of years with CDFW, we anticipate that, like the federal government, we will seek a permanent off-ramp for Fall X2 in future years. The federal permits also, and it's called Action 5, but that's kind of jargony and vague. They also got additional real-time assessment to have flexibility in their operations. So theirs is a little bit different. And basically what that means is that, depending on the risk assessment for various species, and we're focusing on Delta smelt, but it could be others, like white sturgeon, salmon, et cetera, they can toggle up and down their operations. So the permit conditions are not identical. There is a potential, like we said, particularly for the Fall X2, for there to be misalignment, but that's not going to be the case this year. So that's good news. But this potential misalignment could theoretically in the future end up with potential impacts to the State Water Project that obviously Metropolitan is working very hard to help ensure that that's not the case. Next slide. As we mentioned earlier, many of the standards set in the Bay Delta are set by the Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan. The board just received public comments on their most recent draft. They issued a new draft in December of 2025. Metropolitan provided comments as well as others who are participants in the Healthy Rivers and Landscape Program that used to be called the Voluntary Agreements. Comments were due on Monday. Metropolitan provided them as well as state water contractors. And as you'll recall, Healthy Rivers and Landscapes is an alternative to the unimpaired flow requirements where the state board has two pathways included. One is where basically rim dam operators would be required to let out a certain amount of water of what is called more like they imagined the natural flow. And that would have significant water supply impacts throughout the state if that were to end up being the path forward. And so as an alternative to that path, Healthy Rivers and Landscapes was included in the latest draft. And the potential water supply impacts of the Healthy Rivers and Landscapes program is anticipated to be less than the unimpaired flow requirements. It's worth noting the Healthy Rivers and Landscapes program also includes a lot of non-flow measures. They include a lot of agreements amongst the participants to purchase water and to do a series of habitat improvements over the next 8 years should the plan be adopted. So combined with additional flow and non-flow measures, Healthy Rivers and Landscapes is anticipated to provide significant environmental benefits for native species. Next slide. And an update on the tunnel, DWR submitted a certification of consistency with the Delta Plan in October of 2025. The appeals process is ongoing with a hearing expected in February. So February 26th and 27th, there may be an opportunity for folks to show up at the Stewardship Council and voice support or lack of support. We anticipate that there will be plenty of those voices in the room. The Delta Stewardship Council is on track to wrap up any kind of decision in terms of appeals, potentially that they could remand a portion of the certification of consistency to DWR to make adjustments, or they could decide like we're done in April. So we will see how that turns out at the end of this month. But so far, things are good in terms of schedule. So that's kind of a going well. And then we have some updates really on some recent court decisions, which are not so great. There was a recent decision on the court to affirm the ruling against DWR for the 2020 bond validation suit. So that really calls into question, a lower court had found that DWR didn't necessarily have, there were some deficiencies in the bond validation related to, essentially the project description and how the Delta Conveyance Project fit into, the historic description of the State Water Project and how DWR does or does not have the authority to issue bonds for it. Well, an adverse court ruling came out that from the Court of Appeals, so that further called into question DWR's ability to bond and the contractual obligations DWR needs to issue bonds for the State Water Project, including any modifications associated with the DCP. So DWR had in 2025 advanced kind of a dual path strategy because the 2020 case had been languishing for so long. DWR reissued a new bond validation case to kind of head off if the court just languished on the 2020 case. And unfortunately, the 2025 bond validation case did not address any of the issues that were raised in the most recent Court of Appeals ruling. And so the 2025 case was originally scheduled to go to trial in March, but has since the Court of Appeals ruling has since been stayed until there's further resolution on, the Court of Appeals ruling. So, and what that means, and I'm not a lawyer, so please forgive me if there's lawyers in the audience here or on the line, but DWR is taking a series of legal actions, and I think the one that's outstanding is they're going to ask the California Supreme Court for a review of this. And then, depending on how that turns out, and that's, I think, due by February 9th, DWR may need to kind of go back to the drawing board and reassess their approach to being able to get verification validation that they are able to issue debt for the project. And so at the very least, that means that there is probably a delay in resolving this issue and a delay in potential timing for DWR to start financing the project. So next slide. So this is just a summary of kind of the key takeaways. The 2024 incidental take permit amendments came in late last year, and they're consistent with the adaptive management plan, and they increase flexibility for the State Water Project, which translates into more water supply potentially for us. There is an update to the federal permits as well. The terms are not exactly the same, so that does leave a small risk, not for this year, but in future years, that the State Water Project could be unduly burdened with providing water for Fall X2 in particular, without the help of reclamation, which is what we had operated to in previous years. Good news that the Water Quality Control Plan update includes healthy rivers and landscapes. The board does have a process, but to adopt it by the end of 2026, kind of ahead of the change in the state administration, but they've had plans for doing this many, many times before. So we will see if they are able to stick to their schedule. And DWR is taking a series of legal actions, like we said, to try to address the ability to finance the tunnel. And the Stewardship Council is ongoing. And yeah, we'll conclude most likely by the end of 2026. And with that, I am happy to take any questions.
Cheers.
I don't have.
No questions. Here we are.
Thank you. Question is, last year, the golden mussel was kind of came onto the scene as a risk. Is that impacting operations at all right now, or is that more downstream of the Bay Delta?
To my knowledge, it is not impacting operations of the State Water Project yet. Obviously, it has been found in State Water Project facilities downstream of the Delta. Various in-Delta water users are, being impacted. And mostly what that means is that they are trying to increase, monitoring, maintenance, evaluating various strategies for controlling the mussel and increasing, the frequency by which facilities are inspected and cleaned. So it's not yet having a direct connection on water supply that I know of. But it is going to be a growing problem.
Other questions? Okay.
No question.
Thank you very much for the presentation.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And that brings us to director's comments and future agenda items.
Gloria, are you still online?
You still here? Thank
Are you still here? Okay. Any questions, Gloria? Or
No,
comments?
thank you. Thank you to all the presenters today. Thank you.
Thank you, Gloria. And I assume that concludes the meeting. And so we are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.